Hello. We're running our first Spicy IP interview.
That hello and this your brand.
Oh, should I hold this?
No, let that be.
Hello. Today we pilot our first Spicy IP interview. As some of you know, Spicy IP is one of India's leading portals on intellectual property law and innovation creativity policy. Our mandate is to democratize the discussion around intellectual property and innovation policy, particularly in India, and we do a comparative analysis around the world as well. We've been writing a lot of blog articles and advocating for more transparency within the intellectual property and innovation ecosystem over the last 10 years or so. In fact, we celebrate our 10th anniversary last year, and we did a conference this year to mark our 10th anniversary, a conference on open access, transparency, and intellectual property. During the course of that conference, we were very privileged and honored to have Dr. Professor Richard Jefferson as our keynote speaker. And we're fortunate that we were able to get him towards the end of this conference to do a short interview with us. And this will feature as our first Spicy IP interview. Dr. Jefferson is a man that wears many hats. He's a legend in so many ways. He's a molecular biologist. He was part of the first field trials for field trials relating to a genetically modified crop way back in the 70s in Cambridge. He founded Cambia. He founded BIOS, which is a biological open source initiative. So in many ways pioneered the movement around open source technology and technology commons in many ways. And since then, he's been looking very hard at the informational domain insofar as information connects to innovation, and trying in many ways to foster and to democratize the platforms that give us access to technological and innovational information. To that end, he's founded something called The Lens, which is a very powerful tool that seamlessly integrates patent and non-patent technological data and lets the user do much more than they could possibly do with many of the existing proprietary formats. And it's all, of course, free, open access. So with that, let me turn now to Dr. Jefferson and ask him a couple of questions, his reactions to what we're witnessing today within the informational domain, within the intellectual property ecosystem, his thoughts about the future, etc. So now I turn to Dr. Jefferson. Welcome, Dr. Jefferson. So Richard, I mean,
Are we on?
Okay, right. We're on? Right. Okay. How effective are patents as learning instruments? I mean, you spoke of teaching and patents as teaching instruments, but how effective? I mean, the standard critique against patent specifications today is that they hide more than they reveal. And if they're not going to be effective teaching instruments, then what's the value of a resource such as Lens that aggregates all these patent documents and wants to create a good space for innovation cartography? I mean, cartography would depend on how useful that map is and how much it reveals and how much it discloses. Does it do it in an easy manner?
Exactly. Those are great questions, and I think the short answer is that we can rely on two particular interventions to make them vastly better teaching resources. One, we can actually use informatics, machine learning, computational linguistics, to actually extract from an otherwise opaque data the core of the meaning and the teachings. And this came to me when I was speaking with Larry Page of Google at Davos many years ago, back when he was more accessible, talking about how the structure of patent language as practiced by attorneys is very much like the structure of hierarchical software languages, the language of the computer, depending on definitions, on nesting of those definitions. We can actually we can actually improve substantially the readability and the meaning by our willingness to expose the core elements of that. The second part that's important is not just using machine learning to do that, but use human beings to annotate and mark up. When there's self-interest involved in exposing the meaning of something, it can be aggregated. Look at the power of Wikipedia. Wikipedia started with something that not one person agreed with Jimmy Wales that it was going to work. and it's become a global phenomenon of unprecedented scope.
Absolutely.
What's interesting is Wikipedia, however, does not have a cyber infrastructure. It doesn't have an evidence base. It relies on contributions by individuals, but not annotating and bringing together this phenomenal group of interlocking data.
Absolutely.
So using human beings and machine learning, we can converge to make the patent system vastly more a teaching tool. As an example, the best case patent that you read online in any jurisdiction looks like the printed form. That is so old-fashioned. What we need to do is make it a learning journey. Use electronics and proper ergonomics to make it possible to read it in a way where definitions, for instance, will surface when a word that is unfamiliar to you occurs. And this is something we've talked about ourselves in collaborating with Spicy IP. Can we build contextual dictionaries that in the course of this learning journey can help you through the difficult parts, both in legal terms, in intellectual property terms, and in technical terms, so that a reader can actually become, while not an instant expert, well enough informed to be able to get the germ of value from any document. The other aspect is that no patent sits alone. It's always in context. And this context is what makes the cartography metaphor so valuable. It doesn't do any good to say that we have a depth sounding at a particular place in the marine chart if we don't know where the place is. So we have to map every document in terms of what's around it in terms of the knowledge space. And many of those documents are going to be research findings. This is very important. So that's why we've worked for years now to scrape prior art and enabling art citations from the global patent literature and collaborating with the US NIH through their facility called PubMed and with a group called Crossref, we've been able to join these together so we can start building ecosystems within ecosystems. So there's a lot to look forward to turn this huge, cumbersome system of rights into a knowledge system of responsibilities and disclosures. So
that's absolutely terrific. You've had a long relationship with India. You've been coming on and off, and you have a reasonably good understanding of what this country is. And so if I may take the liberty of asking you, where do you see India 10 years, 20 years from now in terms of its potential to be a technology leader, innovation leader?
You know, strangely enough, both on the positive and negative side, the answer is bureaucracy. It's a funny thing as to where I see it going and how I see it getting there. Establishing a good bureaucracy is a very powerful thing, and respect for the mechanism of government and the rule of law is an unprecedented tool for advancement. Similarly, abuse of it is a horrific way to drag it back into the past. What I've seen is an exciting tension in India over the last decade, where both rule of law and the use of creative, well-resourced bureaucracies can actually be an effective tool to advance the country. I'm hoping that in the innovation space, the polity here becomes informed of how powerful a tool such enlightened bureaucracy can be. Strange to say it that way, but there's so much involved in policy, tax policy, regulatory and standards policy, intellectual property policy, public investment, so many different moving parts to the engine that if we don't have a really good, transparent set of levers to those parts, we'll never get way forward. China has sort of leapfrogged in some ways because by being a much more autocratic facility, they can actually impose a particular set of standards. And in a fractious and fascinating democracy like this, that's not the case. So we have to hope that the elements of the government and governance that are necessary to make it more streamlined and evidence-driven can emerge in due course. Now, if you look at what China has done with regard to intellectual property, it's stunning, in fact. They have a phenomenal resource in terms of availability of their full text patents, trademarks, designs, extraordinary efforts being spent by the government. Now, the resources spent by the Indian government are an incredibly tiny fraction of the resources spent by a government representing a populace of about the same size. Now, if India wishes to go in the direction of that third world country you mentioned, all we have to do is neglect the innovation system. If, on the other hand, India wants to harness the enormous creativity and ambition and capabilities of its citizens, all it has to do is make sure the innovation system has low friction, high transparency, and is an enabling environment for these people. It can be done. It can be done by setting up the good organs of government and governance, but it's not going to go without it.
Those are extremely valuable insights for us, Richard. I really want to thank you for taking the time out to answer these short questions, and we wish the Lens and we wish all the pioneering work that you've been doing to democratize our access to innovational information, if I can call it that. Wish you all the best for the future, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Shamna. So long ago,
Second question.
wherever you like.
Second question, okay. So Richard, what do you think are the key challenges for the innovation and the intellectual property ecosystem today?
I'd say the biggest challenge is to democratize it, to make it a system that engages everyone's creativity and everyone's aspirations in reasonable time frames. So up till now, it's become more and more of a complex, almost opaque system, and that discourages participation by a large number of players, the public sector, small enterprises, that really should be key innovators in solving problems in an enduring way. I think the challenge for us is to realize that it's not really about rights to exclude, it's really about capabilities to deliver, and finding the right partnerships requires clarity in the intellectual property system, which we lack. But it's not just about patents either. It's about scholarly knowledge, research findings, regulatory findings. In fact, really, to try to build something these days, to make a thing, a product, you have to assemble a jigsaw puzzle of 1,000 pieces, and if you can't see those pieces, you're not going to be able to know who to partner with, what risks to take, what skills to build, and what you bring to the table. So we think that the biggest contribution we could make is to create an open platform that's private, it's secure, it's open, it's reusable, it's unaligned, and global in scope that allows anyone anywhere to start to visualize the jigsaw puzzle of their interest. So if they're interested in vaccines or medicines, if they're interested in crops, if they're interested in machines, pumps, you name it, they can build cartographies in the area that's interesting to them and surface and identify other partners. Because that's really what the intellectual property system is, isn't it?
Is that what drove you to create the lens? This sense that we need to have a good navigational map that would let people fit the jigsaw puzzle pieces, as you called it. If you could give us a little bit about what led you to really create the lens, and was it this philosophy?
Well, yes, it was both the philosophy, but also my firsthand experience of my own poor choices I made because I didn't understand the landscape of innovation in which I was working. As a scientist, as a biotechnologist in the early days of the field, I was deeply and passionately committed to seeing not only the fruits of my science, but those of my peers benefit society at large. Now, this does not mean that it shouldn't be used by large corporations, but it should definitely mean that it's not only used by large corporations, that many other companies and ideas should flourish in a very exciting and creative ecosystem. And it didn't happen that way. And it didn't happen that way not because of any evil actions on multinationals. It happened because the community at large had not taken steps to make the system clear, navigable, and transparent. And most important, we didn't understand how any one contribution we were making, whether it be a scientific contribution or a patent, would fit into this ecosystem so that we couldn't make the right determinations of who to talk to, who to partner with, and how to dispose of our work product so that people could use it. I made lots of mistakes in those early days, and I vowed that the critical decisions that I was failing to make should not have to be imposed on others. We should actually build a system where people can make their own decisions. As I say, it's informed by evidence but inspired by imagination.
Wonderful. I really love that little slogan of yours. And as you know, India is big on slogans today, so we could do with picking up one or two of the creative slogans that you come up with. But you know, a large part of the lens really relies on solid patent data with the patent registries around the world. What has been your key? Was it easy to get this patent data from patent offices?
Oh, it certainly was.
What is your challenge?
Well, Shamna, we've been doing this for the progenitor of the lens was called the patent lens, and it's over 15 years old now. It's the longest continuously operating free full-text search tool. When we started it, no patent data was available for free. We paid many hundreds of thousands of dollars to purchase and then liberate data from principal jurisdictions such as the United States or Europe. In fact, in many cases, the patent data was not available in any text searchable form, so we had to buy images, sometimes on very arcane formats like old IBM tapes, and turn those images into readable text through optical character recognition. Then we had a marvelous team that marked it up and developed it as a searchable resource. So no, it's not been simple at all, and even to this day, many jurisdictions that are very important, including the one that we both care about so much here in India, have very fragmented, hard to search, hard to understand patent systems, and the data that underlies that is critical that it be shared as a public good.
Is it very difficult, do you think, for a developing country like India to put this data in place and get it into a format that's more easily accessible? I mean, what kind of money are we looking at? I mean, what kind of...
Are we actually talking about the same country? I came over here through a Bangalore that doesn't look like what I'd call a developing country. I'd call it rather like the United States. It's an extraordinarily bifurcated country. There's so much wealth and talent in this country. It's just a matter of applying it to our priorities. To say that it would be difficult for India, a powerhouse of intellectual property and a powerhouse in particular of information technology, to do this would be quite silly. I think it's political will. It's basically the leadership necessary to make this happen. Certainly the talent is here. It's not a hugely capital-intensive process, but the upside of rendering it transparent is enormous. Small innovators, the public sector, have no idea what sort of navigation they will need to make, what sort of choices they'll need to make, and who they need to partner with to make sure their best ideas actually benefit the Indian public or the global public at large, to not be too parochial. So the upside for Indian policy is that if we want to see domestic innovation, not just creativity, but actually implemented creativity in new products and services, we need to allow them to create maps of their choices. And they're not having those right now. So choices in the dark are not going to be very productive. So you ask, is it expensive? It's far more expensive not to do it. We're seeing wasted public funds, wasted private investment, extraordinarily expensive and risk-averse actions being taken. So we need to make it so that we can celebrate here in India the exciting risk, meaning the risk of asking, will the science work? Will the product be acceptable? Will my ideas really reach fruition? Not the silly risks of, did I make the right partnership? Have I infringed someone's patent? Have I identified my markets correctly? We can split these kind of risks into the avoidable risks and the enjoyable risks. And we need to do that to really maximize the upside of creativity and minimize the downside of poor choices.
Fantastic. I really like that sentiment that it's going to be costly for us not to do this.
Very.
And I think that's the message we need to take to our political leaders as well, because we've been, as you know, through SpiceIP fighting a battle for many years to get patent data out in the open. And we have patent data now out in the open, but in a format that's not, that's a little less than optimal, and we need to get it to an optimum format. Is there a format that the Lens proposes that countries can share patent data? And do you have a set format that you take to patent offices around the world and say, you know, this would be an ideal format for us to get this data in and to churn it out through the Lens?
I would love to be able to say there's an ideal format and here's how I want it, but unfortunately almost every patent office is constrained by legacy choices that they've made over the years. We have to live with what they have.
Path dependence of sorts.
Path dependence, also the choices in whatever particular format of XML or free text or even images. So we can't expect patent offices to suddenly reverse 20 years of their practice. What we do have to say is that we can work together to take whatever form they give and to make it to render it a navigable and useful form. The part that's really critical here is that it be open and unfettered. Now, this is very important because there's plenty of for-profit providers that do a pretty good job at providing the Indian data to Indian patent attorneys, but it's staggeringly expensive. And not only that, it's not interoperable. Now, this is the key to the modern innovation cartography meme that we're promoting. If all the data works with all the other data, we also realize that the innovation system of India integrates with the global innovation system. We can't have just a standalone entity to search Indian patents because they're only a part of the picture, right? So the idea is to work with the patent offices of whatever jurisdiction, try to adapt it into the most modern, agile format we can, and render that interoperable with other jurisdictions and other types of knowledge. Because remember, patents are not the only issue in innovation. In fact, they're probably the hot button issue right now, and they have been for some time because they're so contentious in so many quarters. But that said, there's so many other capabilities that reflect what's needed to make a product or a service. The scholarly knowledge, the ability to integrate with millions of research findings around the world, the capabilities enshrined in regulatory or standards compliance, very complex, but potentially open. They all have as their origin public and governmental provided data. Our ambition with the Lens is quite baldly to become the definitive global open platform by which anyone, anywhere, in any language, can construct a map of innovation to help guide their decisions. Now, this can be public funding bodies, so they can see better which scientists, which technologists, which lawyers, which people are actually making good choices and deserve to use public funds wisely. We think it can be private investors who very often spend a huge amount of their time and capital to simply de-risk their choices, to make sure that this entrepreneur really has a clear idea. If we develop this platform as the open, interlinked facility we envision, investors and entrepreneurs can actually speak from the same language.
That's a terrific vision, Richard. What would it take to convert this vision to reality? I mean, what are the key challenges now that the Lens is facing, and what would it take to really convert the Lens into this beautiful global platform?
Just persistence, really, Shamnad. It's we've been at it for 15 years. We don't quit. We have developed relationships with the major patent offices of the world that allow us to ingest their data, often free of charge. In fact, very often they'll help pay us to do it, because we, of course, have bills too to pay. What's exciting in our vision of the future in the next year or two is that we've really hit an inflection point where the community at large is beginning to realize that the tax on the innovation system globally of not having clear, contestable ideas and choices figures in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And if we can decrease that tax on the innovation system, we feel that all parties can participate again. You know, we often talk about sustainability, but there's only one real key to sustainability, and that's inclusion. My sense is that the fundamental human right, even I would call it the human imperative, is the freedom to innovate, to be able to visualize, to create, to use, and to benefit from tools that you make yourself. And my sentiment is that when people and institutions identify problems that affect them and come up with their own solutions, collaboratively, of course, the problems are better defined and the solutions are more sustainable. It's not a matter of us presupposing what is a sustainable agriculture or what is a sustainable health system. It's understanding that many people around the world who have skin in the game are in the best position to define it themselves out of enlightened self-interest. Our job is to remove the constraints from that so that they can make the partnerships they need to solve problems.
Wonderful. If I were to ask you, sort of as a crystal ball gazer, because you've been an innovator, you've been an academic, you're now with the QUT, and you're doing fabulous work there. You've worn several hats. You've seen the innovation ecosystem from multiple perspectives. Where do you think it's headed? The innovation ecosystem broadly, where do you think, what's the future of intellectual property? What's the future of intellectual property within the larger innovation ecosystem? Is it going to remain the way that we're seeing it today? Are there going to be changes? Are people going to opt for a different system? Just, you know,
Crystal ball.
pie in the sky kind of crystal ball gaze.
Okay, that's fun. I think it can't continue the way it is. It's becoming, it's like, you remember as a kid, if we had a little jigsaw puzzle of 50 pieces, we could probably solve it in an afternoon after school. And then, as we got more and more sophisticated, or basically ambitious, we'd get a jigsaw puzzle with 500 pieces, and that would take several days. You can get them with 5,000 pieces if you're willing to write off a month of your life. That's sort of what's happening with the ability to innovate these days, as it requires more and more capability, more and more diverse players, more granular scientific findings. It's getting to the point that the size of the puzzle is so great and the number of pieces so many that to assemble them into products is almost unsupportable if each of the pieces of the puzzle offers the right to deny access. So I think we're moving from an innovation system which is corpuscular denial of access into one that acknowledges that we all benefit when we solve this puzzle. And it's not good. Together. Well, together or not. I mean, it's not ideological. If somebody can solve the puzzle themselves, they can go ahead and do it. The reality is we should be opportunistic. That means if someone needs a partnership to solve a problem, then you should find that partnership and exercise it. This really isn't left or right ideology. It's the pragmatics of decreasing friction. So if you can decrease the frictions and the opacities of the system, we can form the links we need in partnerships. Or if someone wants to go it alone, they should be willing to do it and capable of doing it if it's on their agenda. I guess the future I see is one where we view teachings like the patent system, first of all, as being true teachings. You may remember that the history of the patent system was that in exchange for teaching the
Yes.
public what you've invented, you get a limited right to exclude. Well, we've forgotten about the responsibility while we've been focusing on the right. Another feature of the lens with this common format
So
we're
you would say
building.
there's a duty on the intellectual property owner or the patentee to teach in the best way possible.
Well, of course, that's what many scholars would say, and I would agree with them. However,
And
that has
do you think the patent document today teaches in the way that you would like? I mean,
Oh.
is it a great learning resource? Can we learn a lot through patent documents, or are people strategically hiding more than they reveal through patent documents? I mean, how effective are patent documents today? And I guess that goes to the lens as well. The lens and any resource that has deposits of patent documents and other technological information, if that document itself does not reveal too much,
How good is it?
How good is it?
You're exactly right. But you know what's interesting about the documents that don't reveal too much? The information is in there, but the way it's presented has made it as opaque and difficult to understand as possible. That's reversible. I remember a conversation I had about 15 years ago with Larry Page at a Davos meeting. At that point, it was still accessible. Larry was still accessible. It was the early days of Google. And I remember having a conversation with him in the cloakroom of a museum in Davos, and we were talking about the structure of patent language. And after a while, he was saying that it basically looked like computer language. It depended on definitions. It was precedential. Excuse me one second. Can we cut that and stuff? Mate? Hello? Hi, excuse me. If we turn that on, it blows it. I mean, don't please. Yeah, because, I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut this. Sorry. If you go over there and turn on air conditioning like that, the sound, okay, check your sound level, speak, ruff, speak. No,
Hello,
yes,
Richard. Hello. Can you hear? Is that good?
just say checking
Good,
sound
good,
levels.
Check,
Okay.
check one, check
Good,
two.
good.
Yeah, okay.
Are we rolling?
So, Richard, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came into the world of innovation and IP.
Well, Shamnath, I guess I was involved in doing a lot of basic genetics and biotechnology in the early days of the field, and I became deeply concerned that such powerful tools should be used by all concerned citizens to better their lot. What became clear to me even then was if science was to be a democratized capability, we were going to have to take some active moves.
I see. And if you were to look at the intellectual property and the innovation ecosystem today, what would you say were the key challenges that we're facing?
I would say context. To understand the meaning of science, the meaning of intellectual property, it's only substantially, okay, I'm going to take this over, sorry, you can cut it out, okay? I'll just do the same thing. No, just let it be. You can cut it in post-processing. Just ask the question again. In fact, start.
Wait, if he's asking the question,
You can go back?
I'll
Good, because I just realized I choked on that one. I had a chance. I could have. I don't ask about me. Okay, don't tell me about yourself because I don't really want to talk about myself. Let's talk about so. Tell me what you think about or something.
But that's okay. That question is gone.
Well,
One-
after
it is
he
now-
asks
it
the
is now.
question, you take half a second
Yeah.
and then you start.
Okay.
Yeah. So, with that, let me welcome Professor Dr. Richard Jefferson to our first Spicy IP interview. Welcome, Professor. Thank you very much for giving us the time to do this interview. Hello. Welcome to the first Spicy IP interview. As many of you know, Spicy IP is one of the leading resources on intellectual property law and innovation creativity policy in India. We run a blog, and for the last 10 years, we've been trying to advocate greater openness and transparency within the intellectual property system in India, and trying to make for a more informed debate around these issues that are often seen as esoteric. We've now realized that we need to start interviewing the star personalities that make up our IP ecosystem and our innovation policy space. We're very fortunate that during a conference that we did around open access and intellectual property to mark 10 years of our existence, we had Professor Dr. Richard Jefferson as our keynote speaker. He's agreed to kindly do this interview with us and in many ways help us unleash our first Spicy IP interview series. Professor Dr. Richard Jefferson needs no introduction in the world of IP and innovation. He is a maverick of sorts, wears several hats. He's a molecular biologist, an innovator, an inventor, has built several tools around genetic engineering, was in fact involved in the first ever field trial around genetic engineering for one of the crops in the 1980s. And I was very fortunate to have served with him on the Intellectual Property Council at the World Economic Forum. That's where we first met, and we bonded because we shared similar concerns about transparency within the intellectual property and innovation ecosystem, and we worked towards making that a reality. He's also been named as one of the 50 most influential technology leaders by Scientific American. So a man worth his weight in gold, and whose words are worth their weight in gold when he speaks about intellectual property and innovation policy. So with that, may I now please welcome Professor Dr. Richard Jefferson to this interview, and thank him very much for taking the time out.
Welcome, Doctor.
Yeah. So welcome, Dr. Jefferson. Wonderful to have you here with us, and thank you very much for taking the time out to do this interview with us.